The Blackthorn game. The first thing Grant Whitmore tried to buy from me was time. He walked into my office on a Monday morning carrying a black leather case, set it on my desk, and opened it without introducing himself. Mason Reed stopped drinking his coffee. I stopped pretending to work. There was enough cash inside the case to pay our rent for a year. Maybe two, if Mason stopped ordering food, like every delivery driver in Massachusetts was personally depending on him for survival. Mason leaned toward me. I like him already. The stranger didn't smile. He was young, mid-20s, maybe. Expensive coat, expensive watch, expensive shoes that had never stepped into mud voluntarily. But he looked terrible. His face was pale, his eyes were bloodshot, and his right hand wouldn't stop shaking. I closed the case. Wrong office. His expression changed. You haven't heard what I want. I don't need to. I pointed toward the frosted lettering on our front window. Mercer and Reed Investigations, Missing Persons, Private Inquiries, Nitrogen Monoxide Domestic Surveillance. Mason had added the last line. After 3 straight weeks of jealous husbands, the young man looked at the sign. I'm looking for someone, then start with his name. Ethan Vale. Mason pulled his laptop closer. I didn't. How long has he been missing? 7 days. Police. They search, and they found his clothes. That caught my attention. His clothes. Everything. Shoes, wallet, watch, backpack, body. No. Blood. No. Signs of violence. No. Where? An abandoned rail depot outside Blackwater. I looked at him. Blackwater, Massachusetts. Yes. I pushed the leather case back across the desk. No. Mason slowly turned his head toward me. Caleb. No. The young man stared. You didn't even ask why he was there. I don't care. I'll double it. No. Triple it. Mason coughed into his coffee. I ignored him. The stranger closed the case. For a second, I thought he'd leave. Instead he stood, unbuttoned his shirt, and pulled the fabric aside. Mason stopped smiling. There was a mark beneath the man's ribs. It was roughly oval, maybe 4 inches long. Not a bruise, not a rash. The skin was bright red around the edges and almost gray in the center. What happened? Mason asked. The stranger buttoned his shirt. My father had the same mark. I looked at him again. What happened to him? He died. From what? That's the problem. He sat back down. The doctors don't know. Mason opened a fresh document. Start over. The stranger looked at me. My name is Grant Whitmore. I knew the name. Most people in Massachusetts did. Whitmore Development owned half the commercial real estate between Worcester and Boston. Grant noticed the recognition. Yes, those Whitmores. Congratulations. I don't want congratulations. What do you want? He looked at the closed leather case between us. Like I said, his eyes met mine. Time. Grant's father had been Richard Whitmore. Real estate developer, investor, collector. Apparently rich people got bored buying houses eventually and started buying things dug out of graves. Richard preferred maritime antiques. Navigation instruments, ship logs, scrimshaw, weapons, religious objects brought home by sailors who probably had no business bringing them home. 6 months before his death, Richard attended a private estate auction in Rhode Island. He came home with a statue. Grant showed us a photograph. The object stood perhaps 14 inches tall. Black stone, humanoid, robed. The face had been worn almost completely smooth. It resembled a saint from an old European church, except Grant's father had sent photographs to several specialists and none could identify it. The strangest detail was obvious. Both hands were missing. They had been cut cleanly at the wrists. Mason enlarged the photograph. What stone? No one agreed. Grant said. Some thought basalt. One said black jade. Another said it wasn't anything he'd seen before. What did your father call it? The black saint. Cheerful. He was joking at first. Grant rubbed his hands together. He kept it in his study. Then he stopped letting people touch it. Then he stopped letting anyone enter the room. How long before the mark appeared? About 6 weeks. Same place as yours. Exactly. What did doctors say? Contact dermatitis, infection, autoimmune condition, cancer. Every test came back wrong. And then, he started talking to the statue. Mason looked up. Talking. I heard him one night. What did he say? Grant hesitated. He was apologizing. For what? I don't know. He looked toward our window. 3 weeks later, my mother found him dead. I waited. Grant's throat moved. The study door was locked from the inside. Windows locked. Security system never triggered. Nobody entered or left. Cause of death. Officially, cardiac arrest, and unofficially, Grant stared at me. My father's liver was missing. Mason stopped typing. I thought I'd miss her. Missing. The medical examiner initially assumed he'd had some previous surgery nobody knew about. Then they realized that was impossible. Was he cut open? No. Internal injury? No. Then how does an organ disappear? That's what I'm paying you to tell me. I glanced at the mark beneath his shirt. Where's the statue now? I don't know. That surprised me. It disappeared the night he died. And Ethan. Grant looked down. Ethan was the only person I told everything. Your friend? My best friend. How did he get involved? Ethan loved puzzles, codes, ARGs, escape rooms, anything where someone told him he couldn't solve something. Grant gave a weak smile. He'd spend 6 hours breaking a cipher just to prove whoever designed it wasn't as clever as they thought. What did he find? At first, nothing. Then he found the game. Mason leaned forward. What game? Grant reached into his coat and placed a black envelope on the desk. There was no postage, no return address. Embossed across the front were 3 words. The Blackthorn Game. Inside was a card. On it was a photograph of Ethan Vale. Below the photograph, find the man who disappeared before he disappears. I read it twice. When did Ethan receive this? 3 days before he vanished. Who sent it? No idea. And he played. Grant gave a humorless laugh. Of course he did. I looked at the photograph again. Something bothered me. When was this picture taken? I don't know. Did Ethan? No. The photograph showed Ethan walking past what looked like a train platform. He wasn't facing the camera. He clearly didn't know he was being photographed. I turned the card over. Nothing. Police know about this. Yes. And? They think it's some immersive entertainment company Ethan signed up for and forgot to tell me about. Reasonable. Ethan doesn't forget things. Everyone forgets things. Not Ethan. I handed the card to Mason. Run it. Grant leaned forward. So you'll help? No. His face hardened. Why? Because Blackwater is involved. What does that mean? It means find somebody else. There's nobody else. There are thousands of private investigators. Not like you. That made me pause. What's that supposed to mean? Grant reached into his coat again. This time he placed a business card on the desk. Mine. Caleb Mercer. The old version. An address we hadn't used in for years. A phone number disconnected even longer. I stared at it. Where did you get this? It was in Ethan's apartment. Mason's expression changed. I turned the card over. 3 words had been written on the back. Ask him about Blackwater. The handwriting wasn't Ethan's, Grant said quietly. Now will you tell me why you're afraid to go there? I'm not afraid. Mason snorted. I looked at him. He raised both hands. I didn't say anything. A door opened behind us. Owen Carver stepped out of the back room carrying a chipped marble angel he'd been restoring for a local church. Owen rented workshop space from us because our building was cheap, and his landlord had decided dust constituted an environmental catastrophe. He took 3 steps. Then he saw the photograph of the Black Saint. The angel slipped from his hands. Mason caught it against his chest. Jesus, Owen. Owen didn't hear him. He was staring at Grant's photograph. His face had gone white. Where did you get that? Grant stood. You've seen it. Owen backed away. No. Then what's wrong? I haven't seen it. He pointed at the photograph. I've dreamed about it. Nobody spoke. I closed my eyes. Because sometimes the universe gives you a warning. Sometimes it gives you 3 warnings, lights them on fire, and throws them through your window. I opened my eyes again, when Owen swallowed. Every night for 2 weeks. What happens? I'm standing in a hallway. There's no doors, no windows. Just 2 statues at the other end, 2. 1 black, 1 white. His eyes stayed on the photograph. They don't have hands. Grant's chair scraped backward. Owen continued. Every night I get closer. What happens when you reach them? Mason asked. I haven't. What do they say? Owen looked at me. Give me back my hands. Nobody moved. I looked at Blackwater on the map hanging behind Mason's desk. Then at Grant. Then at my old business card. I hated every possible version of what came next. How soon can you leave? Grant blinked. Now. I pointed at the cash. Half stays here. Fine. If I say we're done, we're done. Fine. You don't hide anything else. Grant hesitated. Fine. I looked at Mason. He's sighing. I'll pack snacks. Then Owen said, I'm coming. No. You need me. No. We don't. You have a statue nobody can identify and I'm a stone conservator. Still no. I've been dreaming about the damn thing. That's actually the strongest argument for you staying here. Owen crossed his arms. I'm coming. Mason looked at me. He does have a car. I hated all of them. Fine. I grabbed my coat. Before leaving, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was an old pocket knife, a photograph of my grandfather, and a strip of paper covered in his handwriting. I took the paper. Mason noticed. He didn't say anything. That worried me more than if he had. Blackwater was a town that had survived by refusing to admit it was dying. 200 years ago, ships had moved through its harbor. 100 years ago, textile mills lined the river. 50 years ago, factories kept half the town employed. Now there were antique stores, coffee shops, boarded windows, and brick buildings converted into expensive apartments nobody local could afford. We arrived shortly after sunset, at the edge of town. I stopped the car. Mason checked his phone. Why are we stopping? I set a timer. 72 hours. Grant watched. What's that? Our deadline. Why 72 hours? Because I said so. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. I started driving again. Owen leaned forward from the back seat. You've been here before. I didn't answer. Mason did. Caleb grew up about 40 miles west of here. Grant looked at me. You said you didn't know Blackwater. I didn't say that. You said you wouldn't come. Different sentence. We reached the old rail depot at 8:17 p.m. Police tape still hung from one entrance. Grant showed us, or Ethan's belongings had been found. A rectangle of dusty concrete beside the tracks. Mason photographed everything. I walked the perimeter. Nothing. No symbols. No disturbed soil. No marks. Owen stood near the tracks. Caleb, he pointed toward an old mailbox bolted to a wooden post. The depot hadn't received mail in decades. A black envelope protruded from it. Grant whispered. That wasn't there. I didn't touch it. Mason put on gloves. Addressed. He turned it around. 4 names were written across the front. Caleb Mercer. Mason Reed. Grant Whitmore. Owen Carver. Mason stared at me. Well, Owen said nothing. Grant whispered. They knew. I looked around the dark depot. Somewhere beyond the tracks, a freight train sounded its horn. Mason opened the envelope. Inside were 7 punched cards, a brass token, half a map, an old Polaroid, and a motel key. Room 306. 1 additional card sat beneath everything else. Welcome back. Grant read it. Back. Mason looked at me. Any of you secretly been doing creepy scavenger hunts without telling me? Nobody answered. I turned the card over. Handwritten on the back. Every door was opened before you arrived. I felt something cold move down my spine. My grandfather used to say something similar. Never trust an open door in an empty house. Someone opened it, or something did. Mason photographed the pieces. Game starts now. No. Grant frowned. What? We don't played. Caleb, whoever sent this knew our names before we arrived. That's enough. But Ethan. We investigate Ethan. We don't follow instructions from strangers. Mason nodded. Finally, a reasonable sentence. Then Owen picked up the Polaroid. Too late. The photograph showed for people standing outside the rail depot. Us. Grant looked at his coat in the picture. Same clothes. Mason took the photograph. When was this taken? Owen pointed toward the sky visible behind us. Daylight. The picture showed us at the depot during the day. We had arrived after sunset. Grant whispered. That's impossible. I turned the photograph over. Tomorrow. 12:06 p.m. Bell. Mason exhaled. Okay. He looked at me. I withdraw my reasonable sentence compliment. The next morning, we went to the Blackwater Historical Society. Not because the game told us to, at least that's what I told myself. Mason had spent half the night examining the punched cards. When stacked in a particular order, the holes formed words: black, hand, east, 6. The brass token carried an image of a church bell. The map fragment covered the eastern cemetery. We could either ignore everything and wait for Ethan to magically walk through our motel door, or follow the trail. So at 11:45, we were standing in a cemetery behind St. Bartholomew's Church. Mason checked his watch. 21 minutes. Until Polaroid time. Grant scanned the headstones. East 6, Owen pointed. 6 mausoleums stood along the eastern wall. The 6 belonged to a family named Harrow. The door wasn't locked. Every door was open before you arrived, Owen said. Don't. Just saying. Inside, a stone angel stood above 3 burial niches. One hand was missing. Grant stared. You've got to be kidding. Mason examined the base. There's writing. The inscription was almost worn away. Owen brushed dust aside. Not what is given. What is taken. At 12:06, the church bell rang. 1 strike, then another, 6 times. On the 6th strike, something clicked inside the mausoleum. A small panel opened beneath the angel. Inside was a brass key. And another photograph of Ethan. This time, he was looking directly at the camera. His expression wasn't playful. He was terrified. Written across the bottom, he found the wrong door. Grant grabbed it. Ethan. I examined the background. Striped wallpaper, cheap lamp, a motel room. Mason held up the key we'd found at the depot. 306, guess we're checking in. The Blackwater Motor Lodge had probably looked depressing when it opened in 1974. Time had not improved it. Room 306 was vacant. The clerk insisted nobody had rented it for months. The key from the game opened it anyway. Inside was exactly the room from Ethan's photograph. Same wallpaper, same lamp, same faded bedspread. But no Ethan. Owen stopped near the bathroom. Do you smell that? Damp carpet? Mason asked. Stone dust. Owen touched the wall, then knocked. Solid. He moved to another section. Knock, knock, hollow. We pulled the dresser away. Behind it stood a white stone statue, human-sized, a robed figure. No hands. Grant stepped backward. Owen stared. That's the other one. From your dream. He nodded. The statue's face had been intentionally destroyed. Mason shone a flashlight around it. How does a 6-foot statue end up behind a motel dresser without anyone noticing? Maybe the cleaning staff here is really bad. Nobody laughed. Owen crouched. The neck isn't original. What? There's a joint. He placed both hands on the statue's shoulders and carefully rotated the head. Nothing happened. He turned it farther. Click. The wall behind the statue moved. Grant whispered. No way. A narrow passage descended behind the motel wall. Mason looked at me, still not playing. We're investigating, of course. The passage ended in a cramped room beneath the motel. There was a folding chair, empty water bottles, food wrappers, a blanket. Someone had lived there recently. Grant saw the notebook first. Ethan, he grabbed it. Most pages contained diagrams, numbers, and fragments of code. Then we found a page written in large letters. If Grant finds this, I'm sorry. Grant sat down. Below it, the game isn't a game. Mason turned pages. Ethan had constructed a timeline. Day 1. Excavation beneath Blackthorn Estate. Day 9. Artifacts sold at private auction. Day 43. Richard Whitmore develops lesion. Day 91. Richard dies. Day 92. Black Saint disappears. Day 112. Owen Carver reports recurring dreams. Owen froze. I never reported anything. Apparently someone knew. Mason said. Another lie. Day 119. Caleb Mercer business card delivered to Grant Whitmore. Grant looked at me. But I didn't get your car until after Ethan disappeared. That's not what it says. At the bottom Ethan had written. They know what we'll do before we do it. Then, underneath, we're not solving their game. We're completing it. Grant closed his eyes. What does that mean? I kept reading. There were 4 pages of instructions crossed out violently. Ethan had written, do not follow clues 1114. I changed the route. If Caleb Mercer is here, find the Providence. He'll understand. I didn't, not yet, but I knew the name. My grandfather had once said it. I was 11. We were repairing a fence after a storm. He'd sliced his palm on a nail. While wrapping it, he'd looked at the blood and said, Mercer blood should have stayed aboard the Providence. I'd asked what he meant. He told me never to ask again. I never had. Mason saw my face. You know it. I've heard the name. Where? My grandfather, Grant stowed. Then that's next. I looked at him. No. What? Ethan explicitly says whoever designed this predicts our behavior. Then Ethan changed the route. Maybe, you think they made him write this. I think that's exactly what they want us to wonder. Grant slammed the notebook down. My best friend has been missing for a week. I know. No, you don't. He pulled his shirt up. The red mark had grown. Thin gray veins now stretched outward from it. I don't have time for you to be cautious. Neither did I. My timer showed 51 hours. I picked up Ethan's notebook. Where are Blackwater's maritime records? Mason was already searching. Town archive. Opens at 9. Then we're there at 9. The Providence returned to Blackwater Harbor in October 1803. That much was official. Everything else depended on which record you believed. The ship's manifest listed 31 crew. The harbor ledger listed 32. A customs record mentioned 6 crates of textiles, 2 chests of silverware, navigation instruments, and botanical specimens. A private journal mentioned another crate. No markings. Captain refuses inspection. Unusual stone icon. The journal belonged to a dockworker named Samuel Pike. Mason photographed every page. Owen found the next connection. Blackthorn. The Providence had been financed by Josiah Blackthorn. The Blackthorn family owned most of the surrounding land within 20 years of the ship's return. Before 1803, they were comfortable. By 1820, they were one of the wealthiest families in New England. At exactly the same time, Blackwater suffered an impossible string of disasters, 2 mill fires, crop failures, a fever outbreak, a bank collapse, a shipyard bankruptcy. 37 unexplained deaths over 15 years. Mason leaned back. Coincidence? Maybe. That's a lot of maybe. Grant was reading another ledger. What about Mercer? We search. Nathaniel Mercer appeared in 1811. Carpenter, surveyor, occasional undertaker. Then Owen found Elias Carver, stonecutter, engraver, church sculptor. Owen whispered, "That's my family." I looked at Nathaniel's signature. The M was identical to the symbol my grandfather had taught me to draw when I was 6. Not a letter, a forked line, 3 roads meeting at one point. Mason saw me staring. What? Nothing, Caleb. Later. Grant suddenly dropped his book. His hands clutched his stomach. Grant, he collapsed. We got him onto the floor. His shirt had ridden upward. The mark had doubled in size. Gray veins spread across his abdomen. Owen touched one. Grant screamed. Owen pulled back. "It's cold. Call an ambulance," Mason said. "No." Grant grabbed my wrist. "No hospital. You need one. They couldn't help my father. You don't know that. I watched him die." His grip tightened. "Find Ethan." I looked at him. "Grant, find him." Then the lights went out. Every light in the archive. Emergency lamps came on several seconds later. Somewhere deep in the building, an alarm began beeping. Mason looked toward the windows. The entire block outside was dark. Power failure. Owen was staring at the open ledger. "Caleb." A page had been inserted between the old records. Modern paper. One sentence. "Blood returns to the harbor." Below it were 3 names: Mercer, Carver, Whitmore. Nobody spoke. Grant was still lying on the floor. Mason finally said, "I think we just ran out of coincidences." Thomas Whitmore had been 19 years old when the Providence returned. Cabin boy, one of only 9 crew members still living 10 years later. That gave us 3 bloodlines: Mercer, Carver, Whitmore, and no idea why. Until we found Nathaniel Mercer's journal. Not in the town archive, in my grandfather's house. The house had been empty since Silas Mercer died 6 years earlier. I still owned it. I just hadn't been inside since the funeral. Mason drove. Nobody talked much. Grant slept in the back. Owen watched the forest. When we reached the house, I stood on the porch longer than I needed to. Mason knew why. He'd been at the funeral. "You want me to go in?" "No." Inside smelled like dust and cedar. Silas had left everything exactly where it had always been. His boots, his coat, coffee tin, the clock he'd promised to fix for 15 years. I went upstairs. Under his bed was a wooden chest. I had tried opening it after he died. The lock had no keyhole. Now I understood why. I drew the Mercer forked line across the metal plate with my thumb. Click. Mason stared. "You've got some explaining to do. Later." Inside were 3 journals: Nathaniel Mercer, 1812, 1813, 1814, and a letter addressed, "To the Mercer who returns to Blackwater." Owen looked at me. "That's disturbingly specific." I opened it. Nathaniel's handwriting was difficult, but the meaning wasn't. The object brought aboard the Providence was not a saint. That was simply what frightened Christian sailors had called it. Nathaniel believed it was much older. Its purpose was simple: it did not create fortune. It moved it. A healthy farm failed. Another prospered. A child recovered from illness. Another died unexpectedly. One business collapsed. Another became rich. Josiah Blackthorne had discovered that if the artifact was placed correctly and fed correctly, misfortune could be taken from one bloodline and transferred to hundreds of others, or reversed. Prosperity could be drained from an entire community and concentrated into one family. Grant whispered, "That's insane," Mason answered. "So was your dad's disappearing liver." We kept reading. Nathaniel Mercer and Elias Carver had discovered what Blackthorne was doing. They couldn't destroy the statue. Fire didn't damage it. Hammers broke. Metal blades chipped. Finally, Elias Carver created a blade from material recovered from the Providence itself. He managed to cut off the statue's hands. Without hands, Nathaniel wrote, it could receive nothing and give nothing. Then they separated the artifact from 6 objects used to anchor it. 6 seals. They hid them. Nathaniel hid the path. Elias hid the blade. Neither wrote down the complete locations, on purpose. Owen said, "They didn't trust their descendants." "No." I said, "They understood them. Power waits long enough and somebody always decides they're the exception." Grant leaned against the table. "So Blackthorne wants to rebuild it. Looks that way." "Mimey." I turned another page. A lie had been underlined twice. The thing came ashore in Whitmore hands. I looked at Grant. Thomas Whitmore. The cabin boy, he carried the crate off the Providence. Grant's face changed. Then why Caleb? Why Owen? Mason answered before I could. Carver cut the hands off. He pointed at me. Mercer hid the ritual. Then Grant. And Whitmore brought the thing ashore. Owen whispered. 3 keys. No. I said. 3 tools. That was worse. My timer showed 33 hours. The next clue wasn't in Nathaniel's journal. It was carved into the chest. 6 circles, 5 empty, 1 containing the outline of a hand. Owen traced it. Carver work. How can you tell? My family has used this border pattern for generations. He turned the chest over. There was a second symbol, a blade, beneath it. Where the dead hear the sea? Mason sigh. Cemetery? Probably. I hate when dead people write riddles. We returned to Blackwater after dark. The oldest cemetery overlooked the harbor. Elias Carver's grave was near the cliff. His headstone had been replaced in the 1920s, but the base was original. Owen found the mechanism. A narrow stone compartment opened. Inside was nothing. Someone had beaten us there. Except for 1 black envelope, Grant swore. Mason opened it. You are doing very well, below, for remain. I looked around the cemetery. Show yourself. Nothing. Caleb, Mason said quietly. What? Camera. A small black camera was attached to a tree 20 yards away. We approached. The red light blinked. Live. Mason smiled into the lens. Then ripped it off the tree and smashed it against a headstone. Oops. A phone began ringing. Not ours. The sound came from inside Elias Carver's grave. Owen stepped back. No, it rang again. Mason found a second compartment. Inside was a cheap cell phone, he answered. A man's voice said, Mr. Mercer, who's this? You've wasted nearly 11 hours. Sorry. Traffic, a quiet laugh. You have your grandfather's sense of humor. My grip tightened. Where's Ethan? Closer than you think. Let me talk to him. No, then we're done. Grant Whitmore will be dead before sunrise tomorrow. Grant looked at me. The voice continued. And Mr. Carver's dreams are about to become considerably less pleasant. Owen went pale. What do you want? You already know. The seals. And the blade. Find them yourself. We try. At least he was honest. That's why you need us. That's why we chose you. The call ended. Mason stared at the phone. Grant said, Chosen. I remembered Ethan's notebook. We're not solving their game. We're completing it. And finally I understood the real puzzle. It wasn't designed to keep us out. It was designed to make us open things the Blackthorns couldn't. We found 2 seals before dawn. The first was hidden inside the base of a memorial bell. The second beneath the floor of a ruined chapel. Neither required clever riddles anymore. Nathaniel's journal contained enough hints once we knew what we were looking for. The seals were small stone discs, each made from a different mineral. Owen refused to identify one. That's impossible. What? I don't know what this is. That's becoming a theme. At 4:30 a.m., Grant vomited blood. We put him in the car. The gray veins had reached his chest. We're going to a hospital, Mason said. Grant grabbed the door. No, you don't get a vote anymore. Hospital means police. Good. Blackthorn knows where Ethan is. And you're dying. Grant looked at me. How long? I checked the timer. 26 hours. Not enough. He laughed weakly. Great, Owen suddenly said. I know where the blade is. We looked at him. He was staring toward the harbor. How? My dream changed. Nobody liked that answer. The white statue had hands tonight. What was it holding? A knife. Where? Owen pointed toward the black horizon. Under the water. At low tide, the foundations of Blackwater's original stone pier became visible. According to Nathaniel's journal, Elias Carver had helped construct it. Owen found a carved mark beneath one support. We waited until the tide dropped farther. Then Mason and I climbed down. Behind a loose stone was a long metal box coated into centuries of corrosion. Owen opened it. Inside, wrapped in blackened cloth, lay a knife. Not impressive, no jewels, no elaborate handle. About 12 inches long, dark metal, one edge. The blade looked almost unfinished. Owen reached for it. I caught his wrist, gloves, he put them on. The moment he lifted the blade, every car alarm along the waterfront began screaming. Dozens, then church bells. Not one church, all of them. Grant doubled over. The mark on his body turned almost black. Owen dropped the blade. The alarm stopped. Nobody moved. Mason whispered, "That's probably bad." Then someone applauded from above us. Slow, polite, a man stood on the pier. Gray coat, silver hair, maybe 55. Behind him were from men carrying guns. "Mr. Mercer." I recognized the voice from the phone, Adrian Blackthorne. He smiled. Finally, there were more of them waiting at the Blackthorne estate. Not an army, they didn't need one, 9 armed men were enough. The estate sat on a hill overlooking Blackwater. The original mansion had burned in 1912. The replacement was enormous. Behind it stood a glass greenhouse. We were taken beneath it. The underground chamber was older than the house. Much older, stone walls, arch ceiling. A circular relief map of Blackwater covered the floor. At the center stood a black pedestal. On it, the Black Saint. Grant stopped breathing. That's it, the statue looked exactly like the photograph. Smooth face. Missing hands, around it were 6 empty recesses. 2 already contained stone discs, our seals made for. Adrian Blackthorne took the carver blade from Owen. Beautiful, isn't it? Owen glared at him. It's a knife, I'm referring to history. History usually has fewer guns. Blackthorne smiled. I like you. I don't. Grant stepped forward. Where's Ethan? Blackthorne's expression barely changed. Mr. Vale became inconvenient. Or is he? Dead. Grant lunged. 2 men grabbed him. You're lying. I wish I were. Show me. Blackthorne gestured. A door opened at the side of the chamber. They brought Ethan out on a stretcher. Grant stopped fighting. I'd seen photographs. That was enough to recognize him. Ethan Vale, 25 years old, still, pale. Grant made a sound I'd never heard from another human being. Not quite a scream, not quite crying. He collapsed beside the stretcher. I'm sorry. Nobody answered. I'm sorry, Ethan. I looked away. Not because I couldn't handle death, because I needed to look at my hand. There was a line running from below my index finger toward my wrist. Most people would call it a crease. Silas called it something else, or wrote. Mine had once been long. Now it ended near the center of my palm. I closed my fist. Blackthorne noticed, still practicing the family superstition. I looked at him. You know about that. I know almost everything about you. Then you know this ends badly, for someone. He walked around the map. Do you understand how difficult it was to bring all of you here? Mason laughed. You mailed invitations. Blackthorne looked at him. You were not invited. Story of my life. Blackthorne ignored him. He pointed at Grant. Richard Whitmore had spent decades acquiring maritime artifacts. All we had to do was place the saint in the correct auction. Grant looked up. You gave it to him. We allowed him to purchase it. You killed my father. The saint collected what was owed. Go to hell. Blackthorne turned toward Owen. Mr. Carver required more subtle encouragement. The dreams. Human beings are remarkably receptive when sleeping. Owen looked sick. Then Blackthorne faced me. And Caleb Mercer. My business card. Your grandfather left quite a collection of them. You've been in his house, many years ago. Something inside me went cold. Blackthorne continued. Ethan Vale was the unexpected complication. He figured it out, very quickly, too quickly. Blackthorne smiled faintly. He was extraordinary. Grant whispered. So you killed him. We needed you frightened enough to seek help. Mr. Vale's disappearance accomplished that, Mason said. And the game. Blackthorne looked around the chamber. The Blackthorne game was never entertainment. Then what? A funnel. That was the perfect word. Every clue, every envelope. Every location, narrowing us, moving us. Until we reached exactly where he wanted, Blackthorn looked at me. You were never players, Mr. Mercer. His smile disappeared. You were pieces he needed for more seals. We had two. The other two were still hidden. And only I could find them. Nathaniel Mercer had designed the route so that certain compartments could only be opened using family marks. Silas had taught me before I understood what they meant. Blackthorn couldn't torture the information out of me. There was no list, no code. It was muscle memory, stories, nursery rhymes, hand gestures, things passed from one Mercer to another. So he gave me a choice: find the seals, or Grant died first. Then Owen, then Mason. I looked at Ethan's body. Blackthorn followed my eyes. He is beyond your concern. Let Mason go. Mason turned. What? Blackthorn raised an eyebrow. Why? He's useless to you. Caleb, shut up. Mason, he stared at me. I continued. He has no bloodline, no ritual knowledge, nothing. Mason's face hardened. Nice, you're a guy with the laptop. Screw you. Exactly. Blackthorn considered it. Mason stowed. You know what? He's right. Owen looked at him. Mason. No. I'm done. Grant stared in disbelief. Mason pointed at me. I told you this was insane before we left Boston. I'm not dying because his dead relatives hid magic rocks around a town. I said nothing. He shook his head. Good luck. Blackthorn smiled. Mr. Reed may leave. Mason walked past me. At the door he stopped. For half a second, I thought he'd look back. He didn't. Then he was gone. Grant whispered, your partner's an asshole. Yeah. Owen watched me. He knew. I hoped Blackthorn didn't. They gave me a car, one guard. I found the fifth seal beneath the foundation of a lighthouse. The guard stayed above while I crawled into a maintenance tunnel. There was another exit. Mason was waiting on the other side. He leaned against his car eating a protein bar. You took your time. I climbed out. You're a terrible actor. Worked, didn't it? Darely, he threw me a bottle of water. Then he saw my hand. Blood ran across my palm. Not from an injury, from the line. The skin had split along it. Mason stopped chewing. No, it's fine. Don't. I didn't do anything. You did. Mason, for Ethan. I looked away. He grabbed my wrist. How much? Let go. How much did you give him? It's not that simple. Then explain it simply. I pulled my hand free. Silas had called it turning the line, not magic. He hated that word. Magic implied you got something from nowhere. Nothing came from nowhere. Every possibility had weight. Every outcome had a cost. Sometimes a person was supposed to turn left. You could push the road right. Sometimes someone was supposed to miss a train. You could make them catch it. Sometimes a heart was supposed to stop. You could convince it not to. But the distance didn't disappear. Someone paid it. Usually the person who turned the road. When I was 9, I said, Silas taught me how to read probability through the lines in the hand. Mason stared. You're serious? You've known me 10 years. I've known you do weird Appalachian fortune cookie nonsense. I can change things. How? I don't know. That's comforting. I can take an outcome that's still possible and make it more likely. How much more likely? Depends. Can you bring back the dead? I looked at him. Mason whined still. Caleb. Ethan hadn't been dead long. Jesus Christ. Blackthorn said a few hours. What did you do? I gave him a road back. How much? I didn't answer. Mason grabbed my hand again. The lifeline stopped halfway down my palm. How much? Half. He released me. Half of what? What I had left. You don't even know how long that was. Exactly. You idiot. Probably. You could die tomorrow. Could have died yesterday. That's not funny. I wasn't joking. Mason turned away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, Does Ethan know? No. Is he awake? Not yet. How do you know it worked? I looked toward Blackthorn Estate. because my hand changed. Mason closed his eyes. You are never allowed to call me reckless again. Deal. What now? Sixth seal. And then, we give Blackthorn exactly what he wants. Mason stared at me. That's your plan. No, I took the Carver journal from my coat. We let him think we do. The sixth seal wasn't hidden by Nathaniel Mercer. It was hidden by Elias Carver, which meant Owen had to find it. That was a problem because Owen was still underground with men holding guns. Fortunately, Ethan had already solved it. His notebook contained a page Mason had photographed before Blackthorn took it, a drawing of 6 circles, beside the last, not buried, not hidden. Worn. Mason figured it out first. The statue. What? The white statue in the motel. We drove back. Room 306 was unlocked. Of course it was. Every door was open before we arrived. Owen's white statue stood where we'd left it. I examined the missing wrists. Nothing. Mason shone his flashlight over the body. Then he stopped at the chest. A circular stone medallion had been carved into the robe. Not decoration, or removable disc, the sixth seal. Mason grinned. Ethan beat them. Not yet, we removed it. Then I called Blackthorn. I have both. Excellent. I want Grant and Owen alive. They are. And Ethan's body comes with us. A pause. Sentimental condition? Very well. I hung up. Mason looked at me. His body. Trust me. I hate when you say that. Get the car. By the time we returned, Grant could barely stand. The gray veins had reached his neck. Owen sat beside him. Blackthorn placed all 6 seals around the Black Saint. Each began to glow faintly. Not movie magic, nothing dramatic. Just enough light to make everyone in the room wish they hadn't seen it. Then he handed the Carver blade to Owen. Restore the hands. Owen didn't move. Blackthorn nodded toward Grant. One of the armed men raised his pistol. Owen took the blade. You don't have the hands. Blackthorn smiled. We don't need the originals. 2 blocks of black stone were brought forward. Owen stared at them. You found more. The Providence carried more than one object. Owen looked at me. I gave the smallest nod I could. He understood. He began carving. It took almost an hour. Nobody spoke. Every cut made a sound like glass being scratched underwater. Grant deteriorated by the minute. Blackthorn watched with the concentration of a man witnessing the birth of a god. Mason had been allowed back because Blackthorn apparently enjoyed proving he'd been right about people. He stood beside me. You okay? He whispered. No. Good talk. Across the room, Ethan's body remained on the stretcher. I watched his hand. Nothing. Owen finished the first hand, then the second. They were beautiful. Perfect. Almost. I knew Owen. Perfection made him annoying. He once spent for days fixing a statue's ear nobody would ever see. The right wrist of the Black Saint was off by perhaps 2 degrees. Deliberate. Blackthorn didn't notice. Owen attached the first hand. The relief map beneath us flickered. A row of tiny embedded stones went dark. Somewhere above, electricity failed. Then another section. Another. Sirens began in the distance. Blackthorn closed his eyes. He smiled. Owen attached the second hand. Grant screamed. The gray veins vanished from his skin. For 1 second I thought it had worked. Then he collapsed. Blackthorn spread his hands. Across the map, darkness flowed from the edges of Blackwater toward the center, toward him. The chamber became warmer. Blackthorn's skin changed. Subtly, the exhaustion around his eyes disappeared. His shoulders straightened. He looked younger. 223 years, he whispered. My family waited. Mason said, That's embarrassing. Blackthorn laughed. Then a voice behind him said, You should have waited another day. Grant lifted his head. Owen froze. I smiled. Blackthorn turned. Ethan Vale sat upright on the stretcher. For once, Adrian Blackthorn had nothing to say. Ethan looked terrible. His skin was pale. His shirt was stained, but he was breathing. Grant whispered, Ethan. Ethan looked at him. Hey. Grant crawled across the floor. He grabbed Ethan. Ethan winced. Easy. Grant started crying. You were dead. Yeah. Ethan looked at me. I have some questions about that. Later. Blackthorn stared at Ethan. I watched you die. Ethan nodded. I didn't enjoy it. Then he smiled weakly. But I did learn something. He raised his hand. Inside it was a small brass pin. Blackthorn looked toward the saint. One of the 6 seals was loose. Ethan had removed its locking pin before he'd been caught. The game had never been fully completed. Blackthorn shouted. Owen moved. He swung the carver blade into the saint's right wrist. Crack, the deliberately weak joint shattered. The hand hit the floor. The chamber shook. Blackthorn screamed. No. Owen struck the left wrist. Crack, the second hand fell. But the map didn't relight. Mason looked down. Caleb. Darkness continued spreading. Owen stared. It didn't stop. No, the ritual had already started. Breaking the saint stopped the transfer from stabilizing. It didn't reverse what had already been taken. Above us, sirens multiply. Grant's breathing became shallow. Blackthorn began laughing. You don't understand. He looked at me. Your ancestors didn't understand either. Blood ran from his nose. He smiled anyway. Once the road is opened, it must reach somewhere. I looked at the map. A black line moved through Blackwater, house to house, street to street. Every piece of good fortune, every chance, every possible future, being pulled toward this room. Mason saw my hand. No. I didn't answer. Caleb, there isn't another way. You don't know that. I do. Then find one. That's what I'm doing. He grabbed my shoulder. You already gave half your life to Ethan. Ethan hurt him. What? Ignore him. What does that mean? No time. I knelt beside the relief map. Silas's voice returned to me. You can bend a road. You can't erase the distance. Somebody always pays it. Why Lifeline ended too soon. There wasn't enough road left. Blackthorn saw it. He smiled. You can't turn this. Maybe. You don't have enough life. Probably not. Then you've lost. I looked at the map. At thousands of tiny streets carved in stone. Every road had an ending, unless somebody made another. I took the carver blade from Owen. Mason grabbed my arm. Don't. I looked at him. I'm sorry. Caleb, move. No. Mason. No. For 10 years he'd followed me into places he should have run from. For 10 years I'd treated that like a joke. I put my free hand on his shoulder. You weren't invited. He stared at me. Remember. Then I shoved him backward. I drew the blade across my palm. Pain flashed through my arm. Blood hit the map. Blackthorn laughed. A child's trick. Maybe. Silas had taught me something else. When a road ends, sometimes you don't turn it. You make another road. I pressed my bleeding hand against Blackwater. Then dragged it across the relief, not toward Blackthorn, away from him. Back through the town. A new line. My line. The chamber went silent. Blackthorn stopped smiling. No. The map lit. One street. Then another. Then another. Blackthorn stepped backward. No. Light moved outward. Away from the estate. Into Blackwater. The transfer reversed. Blackthorn screamed. The years returned first. His face aged. Then aged again. His hair whitened. His skin collapsed against bone. Not because the saint was killing him. Because whatever his family had stolen was leaving. To centuries of accumulated fortune. Going home. The black saint cracked down the center. Blackthorn fell to his knees. This belongs to us. I could barely hear him over the sound of stone breaking. No, I said. It never did. The saint shattered. Every light in the chamber went out. And so did I. Woke in a hospital. Mason was asleep in a chair with his feet on my bed. I kicked him. He woke instantly. You bastard. Good morning. He stood. Then punched me in the shoulder. Ow, good. Where's everyone? Alive. Grant, alive. Owen? Alive. Ethan. Mason looked at me. Also alive. I closed my eyes. Blackthorn, dead. Police. Very confused. Sounds normal. The Blackthorn Foundation is being investigated. Apparently running kidnapping operations through shell company Zen Underground Ritual Chambers creates paperwork. I smiled. Then remembered my hand. It was bandaged. Don't, Mason. Doctor says you'll keep it. That's not what I mean. He knew. He looked toward the window. I don't know. How much? I don't know. I pulled the bandage loose enough to see my palm. The old lifeline was gone. In its place was the cut I'd made. A new scar crossed my palm. It didn't resemble any line Silas had ever shown me. Mason leaned closer. What does that mean? No idea. Can you do it again? No. Good. I mean, I don't know. Still good. Ethan appeared in the doorway. He looked better than a dead man had any right to. Grant stood behind him. Owen was there too. Ethan came inside. He stared at me. So, Grant says you brought me back from the dead. Grant talks too much. Grant raised a hand. He really does, Owen said. Ethan pulled up a chair. What did it cost? Mason answered. Don't ask. I looked at Ethan. You weren't supposed to be there. None of us were. No, the others were. Grant frowned. What? I explained. Mercer, Carver, Whitmore, all tied to the Providence. All pieces Blackthorn needed. Ethan wasn't. He was just Grant's friend. A puzzle nerd who happened to notice something he wasn't supposed to notice. You were collateral damage, I said. Ethan considered that. That's insulting. Sorry. I got murdered because I was too smart. That's one interpretation. I prefer it. Grant laughed for the first time since I'd met him. Then he winced because apparently laughing hurt. Owen leaned against the wall. What happens to the blade? Destroy. He shook his head. No. What? I switched it before the police arrived. Mason stared. You stole an occult knife from a crime scene? I preserved an important historical artifact. You stole it. Preserved. Where is it? Owen smiled. Somewhere nobody can find it. I groaned. We learned nothing. Blackwater recovered. Not magically. That's important. Nobody woke up rich. Nobody's cancer vanished. No bankrupt factory reopened overnight, but something changed. Businesses that had been failing stabilized. A construction project stalled for years suddenly received funding. The harbor restoration passed. People who had spent generations leaving started moving back. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. Grant's mark disappeared completely. The doctors never explained it. He stopped collecting antiques. Actually, he stopped buying almost anything for a while. Richard Whitmore had left him more money than one person could reasonably spend, and Grant began putting some of it into missing person organizations. He said Ethan made him. Ethan denied it. Ethan also refused to stop solving puzzles. Some people learn from trauma. Ethan apparently considered trauma a difficulty setting. Owen went back to restoration work. He never told me where he hid the Carver blade. I stopped asking. Mason and I returned to the office. For several weeks, nothing happened. No cursed statues, no secret societies, no dead people coming back. We found a runaway teenager in Providence, tracked down a missing father in Connecticut, helped an elderly woman locate a brother she hadn't seen since 1989. Normal work. Good work. I started sleeping again. Then, 3 months after Blackwater, a package arrived. No return address. Mason brought it into my office. You order something? No. Grant? No. Ethan? Hopefully not. The box was small. Black cardboard. I didn't want to open it. That should have been enough reason not to. I opened it. Inside was a piece of black stone, a finger, human-shaped, perfectly carved. Mason stepped backward. No. I stared. Decided it was a card. 3 words, level 2 unlocked. Mason shook his head. Nope. For once, I agree. He pointed at the trash can. Throw it away. I picked up the box. Absolutely. I dropped it into the trash. Close the lid. Mason stared at me. That's it? That's it. You're not going to investigate? No. Research? No. Colin? No. Ethan? Especially no. Mason narrowed his eyes. Who are you and what have you done with Caleb Mercer? I leaned back in my chair. I've grown. Terrifying. We sat in silence. 5 seconds, 10, then something knocked from inside the trash can. Knock, knock, knock. Mason closed his eyes. No, another knock. This time louder. Knock, knock, knock. I looked at him. He looked at me. Don't, he said. I didn't say anything. I know that face. What face? The face you make right before we ruin my week. The trash can moved. Just slightly. Then a voice came from inside. Very quiet, very far away. A man's voice. I recognized it immediately. Silas Mercer had been dead for 6 years. But I knew my grandfather's voice. Caleb. Mason went pale. I couldn't move. The voice spoke again. Don't open it. My hand stopped halfway toward the lid. Mason whispered. Was that ... Yeah. Something scratched against the inside of the box. Then another voice spoke. Not Silas, not Blackthorn. Not anyone I ever heard. Every door was open before you arrived. The office lights went out. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, something started knocking back. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. I looked down at my palm. The scar I'd made in black water had turned black, not the whole thing, just one tiny section, at the end of the new row. A branch had appeared. I remembered what Blackthorn had told me. Once the road is opened, it must reach somewhere. At the time, I'd thought he meant the ritual. I don't anymore, because the black saint wasn't the first thing brought home aboard the Providence. Nathaniel Mercer's journal had mentioned one unmarked crate. But the ship's manifest had been wrong about something else. 31 crew members left port. 32 came home. For 200 years, everyone assumed the extra name was a clerical error. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe Blackthorn's family hadn't spent 2 centuries trying to rebuild the saint because they wanted its power. Maybe they were trying to keep something else satisfying. And maybe when I broke their ritual, I didn't close the game. I opened the next level. The knocking beneath my office stopped. Mason whispered, Caleb. I kept staring at the black branch spreading across my palm. What? Our 72-hour timer. I looked at my phone. I hadn't touched that timer since Blackwater. It had expired months ago. Except now it was running again. 71 hours 59 minutes and 57 seconds. 71 hours 59 minutes and 56 seconds. 71 hours 59 minutes and 55 seconds. Mason stared at it. Then at me. Neither of us spoke. From inside the trash can, my dead grandfather whispered one final warning. Run. This time ... We did.